Hi class, welcome to your stats overview. Much of this is vocabulary, so if you need to pause the video at any time to jot down some of the notes, please do so. All right, so to get started, we have to understand our basic vocabulary. You've got measures of central tendency. Those are going to be the numbers we talk about that kind of look to the middle of our information. The standard ones, mean, median, and mode. Mean is the average. So you're going to add up all your numbers and divide by the number of numbers. That's going to give you your mean. Whereas your median is the middle number. So you take all of your data as it's lined up from lowest to highest, and then you start kind of knocking off one at the top and one at the bottom until you find that middle number. If you've got an even set of numbers, it's going to be between those two middle numbers. If you have an odd set of numbers, then it's going to be that middle number. So just make sure you understand the median. And then your mode is the most occurring. This one could be in the middle, but it could also be kind of not really in the center of our data. So we have to be aware of that. The mode is probably one of those that's going to vary from what we consider middle a lot more than the other two. All right, so then we've got our lower extreme. That's a fancy way of saying the smallest or the minimum. Upper extreme, the largest or the maximum. Then we've got our lower quartile, which is the median of the lower half. And sometimes we'll refer to that as the Q1. And then the upper quartile is the median of the upper half, and we'll refer to that as the Q3. The lower quartile and the upper quartile are often, we need those pieces of information because those help us create our box in our box and whisker. That's going to kind of be your ends of your box. We have our range. In order to get your range, you're going to take the maximum minus the minimum, and you're going to get one number. Please do not leave a range as 10 to 20. While your numbers may range from 10 to 20, the range itself is only 10. It's the difference between the maximum and the minimum. Please remember that. And then you have your inner quartile range, often abbreviated IQR. You're going to take your upper quartile, your Q3, and subtract your Q1 from that. So here's an example of a set of data that we are given, and notice how I've already arranged it from least to greatest. So we start counting our information, and we have an even set of data. So we're going to find the middle. The middle, or our median, is going to be between the two middle numbers here. Okay, so that's going to be averaged, and we get 12. Our mean is going to, if you add up all of the numbers and divide by the number of numbers, we actually get 13 here. Our lower extreme, again, minimum 4. Our upper extreme, our maximum, 25. Our lower quartile is going to be the middle of the bottom half. So because we have 5 pieces of information here, it's going to be that middle number, which is 10. And then our upper quartile is going to be the middle of the upper half, 16. Our range is going to be 25 minus 4, which is 21. And our IQR, our inner quartile range, is going to be 16 minus 10, which is 6. And then our mode, most frequently occurring number, we look in our data, and 10 occurs 3 times, so that is our mode. We can use those same pieces of information to create a box and whisker plot. Remember, box and whisker plots will separate your data into quarters, or 25%. Okay, so we can see here in our box and whisker plot, we've got our maximum for both of them is 100, and then our box and whisker plot for data A, our minimum is 50, and data B, our minimum is 40. Okay, so then we can ask ourselves some questions. What is the median of each set? And then our median is always found in the line that's found inside the box. It could be in the center, it could be shifted a little bit. So in both of these, the line inside our box is set at 70. So that's going to be the median of both sets of data. Which plot has a range that's less? Well, A's box and whiskers is shorter, so the range is going to be less in A, which has a bigger or greater inner quartile range, which box is bigger, that's going to be B. And what is the upper quartile in each set? So our upper quartile and our lower quartile are basically the ends of each box. And then here is B. And then what is the percent of data that in plot B that is between 60 and 85? So here is 60 in B and 85 is going to be right there. So we have 60 to 85. So our whole box is in there. So, and our box, remember, in box and whiskers represents 50%. And then the whisker extending down and then extending up represents 25% of your data. So then with plot A, we've got greater than 80, so here to here is 25%, and then in plot B, which is less than 75%, less than 85, so we're going to go from here down, which is 75%. In looking at stem and leaf plots, remember to always use your key so you can interpret your data. So a 7 and a 2 represent 72. So when you're looking for your highest and lowest, your maximum and your min, you go to the bottom of your stem, and then you look at the rightmost number. So 96 is going to be our max, and 52 is our min. So in order to find your mode, you can look for the number that is repeated most in any one row. And we can see here that 4 appears 3 times, so that represents 74. Which 10-point interval did most students score in? So if you look, just at looking at your data, you have more numbers in your 7 column, so more students were in the 70% or 70, the 70s. How many students received a score of 70 or better? So you've got all in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And then how many students scored less than 70? So you've got all of the data in the 60s and 50s. Here is a double stem and leaf plot. So you've got information representing your morning and your afternoon. So relative humidity in the morning, the max here is going to be 89, whereas relative humidity in the afternoon, its max is 59. Okay, so does the relative humidity tend to be higher in the morning or afternoon? You can see here in the afternoon, it's in the 50s. In the morning, it's in the 70s or 80s. Okay, so what's the lowest afternoon humidity? That's going to be here. And then your highest in the morning is going to be the 89. Histograms. Again, I think you're probably comfortable with reading these. Just look at a couple of them here. So here's a histogram. Notice how we have it broken into the number of students here. And then we've got like our 40 to 51, 61 to 70, 71 to 80. So just make sure you're reading your scales and both axes as you're looking at a histogram. How many students took the test? So in this column, 2, 5, 8, 12, and 6. So if we add that up, it's 33. How many students scored at least 70% on 71? So we've got all of these students up, and we add that together, and that's 26. And can you determine the highest grade from this histogram? We unfortunately can't. We know that there are 6 students in the 91 to 100 range, but we don't know if all 6 students scored 100 or 91. Okay. In this histogram here, we can see top gross movies. And so again, we've got our ranges in here, and histograms don't really give us a lot of data, specific data, but they kind of generalize and chunk our data for us. So how many movies grossed at least 141,000? So that's going to be everyone from this column all the way up, which is 12. How many movies gross between 61 and 80, 180,000? So from here to here. So we've got all of those, which is 19. And then can you determine how many movies gross between 121 and 140? So we know there are 10 here, and that's it. So we have 10 movies, but we don't know. Can you determine how many movies gross between this from the histogram? No, because our data only goes from 101 to 140. So we're assuming that there's 10 movies in there, but we can't determine how many of those were in that smaller range or based on our histogram. Let me know if you have any questions with this data or these problems as you work through these notes, and we'll discuss in class. Thanks.